Mom, do you remember when he told you that you made your choice? It wasn't you, it was him who made that choice. He abandoned us himself. And as he left, he handed you this burden of responsibility as if it were your fault. Very manly of him. Nina was surprised at how wise her daughter was. No wonder she chose to study psychology, good for her. But if only it were that simple, if only one could just deftly erase from memory and heart what torments them. Dimitri, I can't do that. We've discussed this already, Nina tried once again to get through to her husband. Don't you understand? Such opportunities are opening up for me. Such prospects. We don't need a second child right now. We'll need money. A lot of money. I'll be constantly busy. I might even have to travel for work. It's not the right time. Once we're on our feet, then we can think about it. Oh, if only we knew in advance, we'd be more careful. But I didn't think you'd be so stubborn. Nina cried and refused to go to the clinic. The baby, he's alive. How can I do that? Her mom always said, God gives a child, he will also give for the child. Oh, Mom, how I miss you. Why did you leave me? I'm all alone. I'm so confused. How can he suggest such a thing? It's his child too. Or am I wrong and complicating everything? Nina sadly pondered. Her husband refused to understand her. He was enchanted by his prospects. Unexpectedly, he was about to turn from an ordinary employee into an entrepreneur. His childhood friend, Lopuki Vasily, with whom he sat at the same desk, skipped classes, made slingshots, and climbed construction sites, suddenly reappeared on his horizon. Vasily offered Dmitri a business partnership. He appeared like a jack-in-the-box. After school, he had moved to a nearby city, studied there, started a family, and opened his own business. At first, his father-in-law helped him get on his feet, and then things took off. Vasily had a small trading business, and now he had returned to his hometown. He reconnected with Dmitri on social media. They talked a lot, and then Vasily unexpectedly offered him a business partnership. Dmitri and Nina had some savings. Everything was falling into place. And suddenly Nina shocked Dmitri with the news that she was pregnant. He said it wasn't the right time and that she should terminate the pregnancy. But Nina was horrified by her husband's decision and refused to agree. The couple argued. Throughout the pregnancy, their relationship remained strained. It was as if her husband was in Nina's life, but at times it felt like he wasn't. He was always disappearing with Vasily at the office or on business trips. Nina picked up their daughter from kindergarten by herself, took her along to the stores, and even when she went to doctor's appointments. The ultrasound showed it would be a boy. 1 month remained until the due date. Their daughter Yulia was already quite grown up, preparing to start school next year, and understood everything. She was mature, beyond her years. She really wanted a baby brother and eagerly awaited the new addition to the family. Unlike Dmitri, who had completely stopped paying attention to the family. He fully immersed himself in his new and exciting life. On the day their son was born, her husband never showed up. When Nina realized in the evening that the baby would soon arrive, she tried to call him. But he didn't answer. Then he sent a message saying he was busy and couldn't respond, promising to call back later. Nina sent him a message briefly stating that she was heading to the hospital soon. Then Nina went downstairs and knocked on the door. An old lady lived there, whom Nina occasionally helped by paying for her apartment and buying simple groceries like bread, milk, and vegetables. The elderly woman was about to go to bed when Nina asked her to watch Yulia for a while. Nina couldn't have imagined her husband would let her down like this. But what could she do? She couldn't take her daughter to the hospital. The old lady assured Nina that she would help and told her not to worry. They all went back upstairs to the apartment. They called an ambulance and waited. Yulia cried and didn't want to let her mother go. But the grandmother promised to tell her a very interesting bedtime story and then, in the morning, make real homemade candy on a stick. Not like those Chupa Chups, the grandmother grumbled. Much tastier and more natural. Yulia whined a little more, but then calmed down. Nina sent another message to her husband, letting him know that the neighbor was watching Yulia. To her surprise, she saw that her previous message hadn't been read yet. But she didn't have time to think about it. The ambulance arrived and took Nina to the hospital. 4 days later, Dmitri picked Nina and the baby up from the hospital. He even brought the prepared bag with things for discharge. However, at home, he continued to behave coldly and was uncommunicative. The next day, he left for work early in the morning. Nina couldn't understand how he could be so indifferent to the baby's arrival. She was overwhelmed with caring for the little one. Thankfully, grandmother Zinaida helped her, otherwise, she wouldn't have managed. Nina was already mixing up day and night due to the endless feedings, rocking, and changing the baby. Fortunately, she had plenty of milk, and despite the stressful conditions, it didn't dry up. 2 weeks passed this way. One evening, Dmitri came home from work, threw his things into a large sports bag, and left. In response to the silent question in his wife's eyes, he said briefly, "You made your choice. Back when you decided to keep the baby." The poor woman had neither the strength nor the desire to argue. She just sank into the chair next to her son's crib and cried. Now she was completely alone. With 2 children to take care of. How she managed it all, only God knows. Grandma was a great help. Nina worried and said she couldn't even pay her, but the elderly woman reassured her that she understood and that money wasn't an issue. She had known Nina since childhood and had been best friends with her mother, despite the age difference. So, she wasn't going to abandon Nina in her time of need. God willing, we'll raise your children. We've seen worse times. Look how I raised mine. Your mother, Anna, was closer to me than a sister. I owe her a lot. I won't leave you. And you know, since I started helping you and taking care of the children, I've forgotten about my ailments. Zinaida smiled. I don't have time to sit and dwell on them. I don't have my own grandchildren, so at least I can help with others. Nina smiled and hugged the grandmother, grateful beyond words. Gradually, the children grew up. Nina never told them their father had abandoned them. She said he had gone far away and missed them but couldn't come back. She even bought gifts and pretended they were from him. Dmitri had disappeared without a trace. They divorced and stopped communicating. He paid child support but never tried to see the children. Nina didn't even know where he was. One day, she saw an article in the local newspaper about some businessmen planning to open some stores. She didn't read it carefully, but in the gray photo, she recognized her ex-husband. He stood next to his friend Vasily, with a tall, beautiful woman on the other side. Well, of course, Nina thought, he's become a wealthy man, a good catch. How could he resist? Maybe he's married and has other children now. What about mine? They're his too. Nina couldn't understand her husband's actions. So many years had passed, and deep down, she still hoped it was some mistake. It couldn't be real. They had loved each other. Did she still love him now? It was hard to say. But she hadn't had any other relationships. Even though Grandma Zinaida, when she was alive, had told her she was still young and shouldn't give up on herself. Nina had long since done so, used to living alone. Nina worked as an economist. When the grandmother was still helping, she managed to complete a couple of courses and improve her qualifications. She then found a very good, well-paying job. Everything was great, except for her personal life, which was silent and barren. One day, Nina decided to hire a private detective to find out where her ex-husband was and what he was doing. How had his life turned out? After all, her children, now 18, had stopped believing in the stories about their father's love and his lonely, faraway existence. For 2 days, she was overwhelmed by the information she received. The detective had done an excellent job. All the details of Dimitri's current and past life were laid out on 5 pages. There was no more guessing. Here was the truth. All those years, while Nina struggled, juggling work and children, Dimitri had been living comfortably. His business with Vasily had flourished. Their income had grown, although it hadn't affected the child support payments. Nina sadly noted that Dimitri had remarried and then divorced. He had no children with that woman. Later, he and Vasily had disagreements, split their business, and went separate ways. The report mentioned that their ownership shares had never been equal, many wrong decisions were made, and the partners couldn't agree, leading to losses. Each partner blamed the other for the situation. They had a complete falling out. However, through the court process, Vasily ended up winning. Dimitri was left with mostly debts. He must have hired a good lawyer, Nina thought, while my husband trusted him completely. Well, it seems he was set up from the beginning. Found a fool to exploit. Since then, for several years, Dimitri has been working as a simple employee at a state enterprise again. He lives alone in a one-room apartment. Nina felt no schadenfreude. Just a slight pity and sadness, not for her ex-husband, but for the years when everything was still good between them. Before Vasily interfered with his proposal. Who knows, maybe things would have continued to be good. Or maybe not. Fate saved her from something, but gave nothing in return. The children grew up. Yulia was studying at the institute, and her son, Yevgeny, was finishing school. And one day, Dimitri appeared at their door. He just showed up. Nina opened the door and was surprised to see her ex-husband. He hadn't changed much, except for some gray at his temples. The children were not home. Dimitri said hello and stood silently on the threshold for a long time. Nina neither invited him in nor drove him away. They talked like old acquaintances about unrelated things. Then he left. After that, their communication became daily. Nina didn't drive him away, but didn't know what to do. A couple of times, Dimitri found the children at home. They only greeted him dryly, not intending to engage with him. Then Nina talked to each of them separately. She wanted to know their opinion about their father. Yevgeny said he was a complete stranger to him. But I miss Grandma Zinaida. Who is he? And where was he all these years? Yulia asked directly, Mom, do you still love him? I don't know, daughter. I wanted to discuss it with you. If you're asking, it means you're unsure. Her daughter was right. Nina was unsure. Lately, Dimitri had been actively courting her and showing interest in the children. Several times, he mentioned wanting to mend their broken relationship. He asked for forgiveness. Nina, truth be told, enjoyed his attention and compliments, but the children were critical. They didn't trust him but remained silent, understanding that their mother had to make her own decision. After all, it was her life. Yulia was soon to be married, and Yevgeny was planning to enter an institute and live in a dormitory. And their mother? Maybe she's afraid of being alone, Yevgeny told his sister. I don't blame her. But I don't want to see that man who once betrayed us all with her. She should find someone else. I think she still loves him, Yulia said thoughtfully, but she won't admit it, even to herself. Dimitri, I no longer trust you. I can't live like this. You're hurting me. Why did you come back and reopen my wound? I love you, Dmitri replied. You have the right not to believe me, but it's true. It seemed he was sincere. My God, how could he have done this to me and his children? Nina thought, but out loud she said, sorry, I really don't believe you. We've played at love long enough. You should go. Dmitri left. And Nina truly seemed to have made up her mind. She stopped thinking about him. She realized she had been bound to him by an invisible thread all these years, always thinking, always remembering. She even hired a detective, sparing no expense. But why? Here he was, back. Did she want to take him back? No. The simple answer from the depths of her soul was no. And once she decided that, she felt relieved, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Her ex-husband made a few more attempts at reconciliation, but realized that Nina was determined and gave up. Nina kept thinking about her daughter's words, that it wasn't her but him who made the decision back then. And she was right. Why hadn't she thought of that all these years? She had lived with that burden. She couldn't have done anything differently. And now she was very glad she hadn't succumbed to his persuasion and kept the baby. Dmitri would reap what he had sown. Life is a complicated thing. You can't mess up at first and then just come back and rewrite everything with one stroke. He should have thought of that earlier. Earlier.